Children's sermons are always better than any other one anyway, aren't they? Yes, I couldn't agree more. What a wonderful turnout. This is great. This is just great. I want us to imagine for just a minute, especially you younger guys, that we're going to put a couple teams together, maybe for something like kickball. So you're going to have to decide who you want on your team, right? So if you were going to look around here, how would you go about choosing who you would want on your team for kickball? What would you be looking for in somebody? Big feet, somebody who... What about running? Would you want somebody who could run really fast, maybe? That would be great. Hard to play kickball without a ball. Anybody who's really athletic and strong and fast, you would want those people in your team. Yep. But what if we were trying to put together a different kind of team? Let's say we were doing a team for a spelling bee. Would you look for the same kind of person for a spelling bee? Would you want all that athletic strength for a spelling bee? You'd want somebody who had what kind of characteristics? You were going to be on their team with a spelling bee. You'd want them smart. You want somebody who reads a lot, somebody who does well in school. And so depending on what kind of team you're putting together, you might choose very different people. Now, if you were doing this in school, you'd probably know all your classmates. You'd know who was strong. You'd know who was fast. You'd know who was smart. But what if you were with a group of kids that you didn't know at all? That would be a little bit harder. You'd have to try to kind of guess who would be really good at kickball. And you might be right, but you might be wrong. Because there might be somebody who looks really strong, but maybe they don't like kickball. Maybe they're not good at it. Maybe they're so big and strong that they're not all that coordinated. Or maybe you think, okay, for putting my team together for a spelling bee, people who wear glasses are obviously smarter than everybody else, right? Yeah, we know that. Right? Sure. We think that, but that may not be true. Just because somebody wears glasses, they may not be that great of a speller. So sometimes looks can be deceiving. If we didn't know the people, we couldn't just judge by looking at them to say, oh, this person would be really good at kickball, this person would be really good at spelling. Well, that same kind of problem of not knowing what to look for is what we heard about in our Old Testament reading today, when Samuel was told by God to go to Jesse's house and to look at all of Jesse's sons. For some reason, Jesse's daughters didn't qualify. Look at all of Jesse's sons, and God was going to tell Samuel which one of his sons were going to be the next king of Israel. That's a pretty big job, isn't it? That's really important. You want the right person to be king over your country, don't you? And Samuel didn't know anything about Jesse's sons. So he shows up at Jesse's house, and he has Jesse kind of parade his sons in front of him. And the first one comes through, and he's really tall. So Samuel thinks, somebody who's really tall would be a great king over Israel. But God says, nope, he's not the one. Jesse's next son comes through, and he's kind of big and strong looking. Got any big, strong people? And Samuel, he's a little bit prejudiced. He says, I think this is the one who God's going to choose to be king. And God says, no, Samuel, he's not the one. And then the next son comes through, and he looks really smart, like Mr. Coates over there. Dan, you thought I was going to pick you, didn't you? You didn't know you had the ringer sitting behind you. So the third son looks really smart. And so Samuel thinks, this has got to be the one. You've got to be wise to be the king of Israel. And God says, nope, not him either. And then the rest of the sons filed past, and one after another, Samuel, that's what a prophet does. A prophet listens to God. God says, nope, nope, nope. Keep them coming. That's not him, that's not him, that's not him. And finally, all the sons had passed through. And God had said, not one of these is the one who's going to be king. So Samuel was a little bit confused. So he asked Jesse, he says, Jesse, do you have any other sons? And he says, well, yeah, my youngest, but he's a little guy. Nobody would consider him for king. He's out tending the sheep. So Samuel said, well, we're going to sit here and wait until you bring in your youngest son, David, because I want to see him. Sure enough, David comes in, walks in front of Samuel, and God says to Samuel, he's the one. So Samuel pours the oil on David's head, and we all know about King David, right? David and Goliath. King David went on to do great things, but at that time, nobody could tell from looking at him, because he was just a young boy, that he was going to grow up to be just the kind of person that God needed to be king of Israel. Well, God went on to explain things to Samuel a little bit more. He says, I don't look at people the way that people look at people. I don't look at the outside of people. I don't look at their appearances. I don't look at their size, their shape. He says, I look at people by looking into their hearts. So I wonder, what can we do to look at people, not from the outside, but to look at people by looking into their hearts? So I brought something that maybe can help us. I hope. We'll see. Let's see if this helps us any. Let's see. I brought a special pair of glasses. I'll stand up so that everybody can see these really well. Can everybody see my glasses? These glasses give me superpowers and enable me to be able to look into your heart and see everything that's there. Oop, I won't tell. Wouldn't that be neat if you had something like this that could give you the ability to look into people's hearts? But as great as these glasses are, and I know this was a real creative effort for me to make these last night, that might not really work, would it? Great idea, but it might not work. So we're going to have to think of some other way to look at people and not judge them from the outside, but look into their hearts. Well, fortunately, we had another reading today. Besides that Old Testament reading, we had the epistle reading from 2 Corinthians. And in that reading, St. Paul tells us really important words. He says, we walk by faith and not by sight. And what that means is by not walking by sight, that means we don't look at people and judge them from what we see on the outside. People may look different from us. People might not have on fancy clothes like we wear. People may live in a different part of town. God says, don't judge people by what you see on the outside. What it means to walk by faith is to use all of the tools that God has given us to understand people on the inside. Things like prayer. If we ask God to help us learn to look at people and ignore all of the outside characteristics but look into their hearts, and that's something we can pray for every day. But also, if we find ourselves starting to judge someone, we can just say a quiet little prayer to ourselves. God, help me to stop thinking what I think about this person because I don't really know them. Help me not to judge them from the outside. Help me to see them for what they really are on the inside, the way you see them. So prayer is one of those great tools of faith that God gives us. The next one is the Bible. Because the more we read the Bible, the more we know those stories about the Bible, especially the ones about Jesus, we get to see these great examples of how Jesus treated people. And did Jesus ever judge anybody from the way they looked on the outside? No. Jesus must have had his own set of heart glasses because he could read people's hearts. And it's a lot harder for us to do it than for Jesus. But that's something that we can follow those examples that we hear about in the Bible until we learn to do it better. And finally, the last thing that I think we can use as a tool of faith is to know that a lot of times When we judge people from the outside, we're using our heads. And what God is asking us to do is use our hearts. If we think about people from our hearts instead of with our heads, I think there's a much better chance that we will wait and get to know somebody for what they're really like and not judge them by what we see on the outside. Well, even though these superpower magic heart glasses didn't work, I hope that maybe by them being funny enough that you'll remember, this will help you remember what we've been talking about today, what God wants us to do. God wants us to see other people the way God sees them. And not only that, God wants us to look at ourselves the way God sees us. Because, it's not only other people that we may judge a little too quickly. We may not think about ourselves the way that God thinks about us. We may not know that we are capable of all of the things that God knows we're capable of. So that's something we do for ourselves too. God wants us to use our hearts to make sure that we are looking into the hearts of people around us. And my prayer is that all of us will remember this little set of glasses, and the next time you find yourself meeting someone new, someone you don't know, someone that you might be tempted to jump to conclusions about, that you'll take your time, you'll say a little prayer, you'll use your heart, you'll remember the way that Jesus treated people, and that you will look at people the way that God looks at them. Think y'all can remember that? Great. Thank you for being so attentive. Y'all can go back to your seats now. Thank you, children.